Hi, and welcome to Kunsang Payo Chuling. We're really glad to have you with us today and to join us for a teaching by Jetsunma Ahkon Lhamo. Today's teaching is entitled The Guru is the Light in Samsara. The teaching was originally given in 1992, and we share it with you today. And hope you enjoy it. As soon as I get a grip on this. So here we go.
At any rate, I have just begun a series of teachings concerning a concept that is practiced on the path called view. And view is concerning guru devotion, devotional practice, an idea that is extremely important on the path, on the Vajrayana path, and in fact is considered to be the cornerstone of practice. If one does not have proper view, one does not engage in guru devotion, there's very little progress actually made on the path. Guru devotion cannot be understood as a personality cult. It isn't practiced on a personality level. It isn't like that at all. One should not take a teacher, take a guru because one likes their appearance or their personality. One should accept them because they are qualified, because one has been moved in some way by something that they have been given. In the Vajrayana path, one's core teacher, that is to say the teacher that relates to the root of one's practice, is called the root teacher. And the teaching is that one can recognize one's root teacher by seeing that teacher, or whoever that might be, who is able to reveal to them something about their own mind, or open up to them something about their own nature. It is possible to have more than one root guru, more than one root teacher. Guru Rinpoche himself claimed more than 100 root teachers. That is less common than the usual experience. Here in America, particularly, one has 1 or 2 or perhaps even 3 root gurus. But any teacher that specifically reveals to you something about your mind, or is the one that is instrumental in hooking one onto the path, that is considered to be the root guru. In explanation of that, I would like to tell you a story. I tell stories very badly, and I'm sure, hope Guru Rinpoche will forgive me if I get some of the details wrong. But this is a story that I was told by one of my teachers. And one of my teachers told the story of a tulku, a reincarnate Lama, who was studying in a monastery. Now, reincarnate lamas are recognized at a young age, and they're sort of expected to attain some realization since they have done that in the past. They're expected to have really good results in their practice, and they're expected that immediately upon practicing they'll be able to jump right into it. And there are many bodhisattvas who with very little or no practice are able to attain realization and to move very quickly into benefiting sentient beings simply by virtue of their past practice. This particular tulku was going through the schedule of academic learning and was distracted, not having much ability. And then it was recommended that this young tulku go into retreat. And so he did his three-year retreat, and he came out of 3-year retreat. And he went to the head Lama in the monastery and said, I haven't had much result. What's the problem here? And the head Lama said, go back into retreat and do another 3 years. So the tulku went back into retreat and did another 3 years, and then came out of retreat and said, well, I haven't had much result. What's going on? And the Lama said, go back into retreat for another 3 years. Okay, so the tulku goes back into retreat for another 3 years and comes out and says, nothing yet. And the head Lama, very high Lama, very reputable, considered to be a very elevated, enlightened Lama, said, go back into retreat for another 3 years. Well, okay. So the tulku goes back into retreat for another 3 years. Nothing yet. Comes back out. Bingo, nothing. And the Lama says, well, maybe some solitary retreat. So this goes on and on and on for something like 19 years. 19 years. And finally, the tulku comes out of retreat and says, I'm at my wit's end. I can't think what to do. So he goes to the Lama and says, what can I do? I'm failing. There's nothing happening here. I've had no signs, no realization, nothing that indicates that I can be of any benefit. And the Lama said to him, the head Lama said to him, your problem is your lack of devotion. The tulku said, the young tulku said, or not young anymore, I guess, said, but I have so much devotion for you, and immediately drops to the floor, begins to do prostrations. I have so much devotion to you. I think of you all the time. Your picture is on my altar. Your face is in my heart. There's nothing for me but you. You are all I think about. And the Lama says, but I'm not your root guru. And the tulku went, how can you say that? How can you say that to me? I can't think of this. What are you saying? And he said, you've forgotten. When you were a little boy, you had a nun, a simple nun, who taught you the letters of the Tibetan alphabet, and taught you about the seed syllable ah, and taught you about the all-pervasive nature of the seed syllable ah, and gave you some mantra, and showed you something of the nature of your mind, and that was the one that hooked you into your practice, not I. And the tulku went, and just was crushed, realized that this was in fact true. So he went into retreat again and practiced guru yoga with a simple nun who raised him, and then attained realization. So this is amazing, isn't it? The Lama is for each and every one of us, the one who has hooked us onto the path, the one whose compassion has touched us to the degree that they have revealed to us something of the nature of our mind. An amazing story. Sometimes in our haughtiness and our arrogance, we look for the biggest and best robe possible, the one who is the most incredible high guru. And we try to think, I actually had new students come to me and say, my root guru was the Dalai Lama. Why? Well, because I received a teaching from him sometime in New York, and therefore. But I have to say that that may not be true. That there is some simplicity and purity and benefit in being able to see that the teacher who for you has been a pillar of strength, one who has hooked you onto the path, one who has stood by you, one who has enabled you to see something of your own mind, that one is your true root guru. On this path, understanding one's root guru and practicing accordingly is extremely important. And we have a lot of delusions about what that actually means. Our tendency is to want something very fantastic as the cornerstone of our spiritual experience. And in that haughtiness and that arrogance, we miss the point. The point is that for us, the teacher is the door to liberation. The guru is the very door to liberation. The Buddha teaches us that in samsara, there are only samsaric things. That means that in samsara, there are only things whose basis and bias are the ego clinging or fixation on self-nature as being inherently real. that in samsara, and this defines samsaric things, all things arise from the fixation on self-nature. We are born into this life, are we not? And our first cognizance is of self-nature in some way. Everything that comes from that point is built on the idea and clinging to self-nature. But this doesn't begin with this lifetime. We are taught in Buddhist tradition that we have believed in self-nature and have assumed the identity of self-nature since time out of mind. How long is time out of mind? Well, it's literally that, time out of mind. It's unimaginable time. So we have the knee-jerk reaction and habitual tendency of clinging to self-nature so deeply embedded within our mind stream that our whole mind stream phenomena continuum is built on the assumption of self-nature as being inherently real. Everything is built on that assumption. And so that all of our experiences, therefore, are samsaric in nature. How the teacher becomes so important on the path is that the teacher and the appearance of the path, the appearance of the teacher, is the one thing that we can experience that is not samsaric in nature. And the reason why is that the appearance of the path and the appearance of the guru therefore, does not arise from the assumption of self-nature. Since it does not arise from the assumption of self-nature, it does not result in clinging to self-nature. The seed always determines the nature of the fruit. Anything that arises from the clinging to self-nature will result in more clinging to self-nature. For instance, in samsara, if we are thinking that we are lonely or unhappy, and what we try to do is solve that loneliness or unhappiness through whatever means in samsara, like getting more relationships, or getting more cars, or a new house, or some new clothes, or whatever it happens to be, the result will not be good. Why? Because the seed of that is the clinging to self-nature. It will only result in more clinging to self-nature. That's the only possible result. So the more samsaric activity we engage in, the more clinging we find ourselves wrapped up in or fixated on. The path, that is the path of the Bodhisattva, the path of Dharma, appears in the world due to the blessing of the Buddha nature, due to the blessing of the appearance of the Buddha in the world. All of the Dharma path that we practice here arises from the mind of enlightenment. It arises from the Buddha. Any path that leads to enlightenment must have arisen from the mind of enlightenment. If it did not arise from the mind of enlightenment, in other words, if some ordinary sentient being appeared in the world and just made up a path, it would not result in enlightenment, because it arises from the mind of an ordinary sentient being. But the Dharma path, the path of the Bodhisattva, arises from the mind of enlightenment, was brought to us by the Buddha, the appearance of the Buddha nature in the world. Any path that results in enlightenment must do that, must arise from the Buddha nature. Any path that is arising from the Buddha nature must result in enlightenment. How does one's root guru appear in the world? It was Guru Rinpoche himself, the very display of the fully enlightened Buddha nature, who brought Buddhism into Tibet, that said, "I will appear as your root teachers," indicating that his blessing would be there in the world as your root gurus, who would be enabled to bring to you the same blessing that he brought to Tibet. Therefore, the appearance of the root guru in your life arises from the mind of enlightenment and can result in the mind of enlightenment so long as one follows the path and practices the path with devotion, with surrender, with purity of intention, with compassion. These things are necessary ingredients. To meet the guru and to turn away, of course, will not result in enlightenment, but to follow the path that is brought to you by the mind of enlightenment will most surely result in enlightenment. The practice of devotion that arises from the mind of enlightenment will surely bring enlightenment. The seed results in the fruit. It is always that way. Just as one cannot get bananas from apple seeds, one cannot get enlightenment from samsaric conditions. Just as apples cannot arise from banana seeds, one cannot get ordinary samsaric conditions from the mind of enlightenment. Therefore, devotion becomes essential upon the path. Devotion properly practiced is essential upon the path. Arising from the mind of enlightenment is the seed that must be nurtured, that will result in the sure and certain blessing of enlightenment. Enlightenment is your very nature. There's nothing to turn away from. Your true nature is the pure primordial wisdom, pristine state, free of distinction, free of discrimination, free of contrivance. That is your nature. Your nature is inseparable from the Guru, and upon practicing devotion purely, you will find that your face is the face of the Guru, that you are inseparable, and the Guru's face is your face. Practicing devotion properly, one will see the blessing of the Guru everywhere. If one were to look at every circumstance in the life, let's say if you were to walk out, Buddha forbid, into the street and break a leg, just break a leg. Now, under ordinary samsara conditions, you would say, "Damn, I broke my leg. This is terrible. I broke my leg and now I can't walk and now everything's really awful." That might be what you'd say. Probably that's what a lot of us would say. You'd have a terrible experience of breaking your leg. It would keep you from getting around. But supposing your practice of devotion were very pure, supposing you were enabled through the blessing of your practice and through your devotion to the Guru, you might walk outside and break a leg, and you might say, "Well, I don't understand this yet, but in some way this is the blessing of the Guru. This is Guru Rinpoche's blessing. So this being the blessing of the Guru, I'm laid up for a while. I think what I'll do is buy one of these little gizmos, called a mala, and I'll start accumulating some mantra. In fact, maybe I'll hobble into the temple and try to get the blessing of the empowerment or the lung, and I'll have plenty of time now to accumulate some mantra. And maybe during the time you've accumulated some mantra and really practice the blessing thoroughly, maybe during that time you'll have a sign, a dream, something that hooks you and tells you, this is it, this is it. Something that touches you deeply. Sometimes it's a dream of the Guru. Sometimes it's an indication of the time to come, spent learning the Guru's blessing, accomplishing the Guru's blessing. Whatever it is, suddenly this broken leg becomes a blessing, doesn't it? It becomes what hooks you on the path. It is the hand of compassion reaching out and touching you, enabling you where you might not have stopped to reach and touch and taste this blessing any other way. You've had things like that happen in your life before, but you didn't recognize them. You could have taken advantage of them at any turn, but you didn't know. Well, now you know, and this is called the beginning of practicing devotion, the beginning of practicing view. Anything that occurs to you, any heartbreak, any pain, any fundamental unhappiness, could be in disguise Guru Rinpoche's blessing. Practicing devotion, allowing your heart to be softened and deepened, seeing the Guru's blessing in anything, this could be your time. This could be it. I've seen it happen again and again. A student whose heart was like a rock, untouchable, unmovable, might suffer the worst, most back-breaking, broken heart. And that broken heart might be the thing that softens the student finally. Like rolling away the big stone, or cracking it open, or breaking through it. Somehow the student becomes empowered. Why? It seems because they've lost everything else. And so you have to turn to the truth. That moment might be the most potent moment of your life. Can any of you relate to that? The most potent moment of your life might be when you are completely disabled, crushed, laid out to the bone. And that is truly Guru Rinpoche's blessing. Because it will pass, you know? You'll get over it. The great thing about continuum is that it continues. That's the only good thing about it. And the one thing that the Buddha taught that should remain first and foremost in your mind at those moments is the teaching of impermanence. Everything is impermanent. All suffering, all pain, all happiness, everything is impermanent. The one thing that remains stable, the one thing that you can count on, the only thing that you can count on, is your nature. The only thing that you can move toward with any sense of potency, with any sense at all, is the arising of the bodhicitta, the arising of the compassion, the appearance of compassion, loving kindness, devotion, practice within your life. That's all that counts. There's nothing else. Nothing else. Any of you who have met with Guru Rinpoche's blessing, who have suffered enough to know that this is true, this is your time and you are free to accept the blessing. No one can take that away from you. You know, it's the one thing in your life that no one can take away from you. I know I've heard all kinds of New Age wonderful ideas about, they can take away my dignity. Baloney. They can take away your dignity. They can take away anything they want to. But the one thing they cannot take away from you is your practice. Your practice is yours. Even Guru Rinpoche himself, should he be so inclined, which he is not, cannot take away your practice. Lord Buddha himself could not come to earth and keep you away from your practice. Because the nature of the Buddha and your own nature is inseparable. It cannot be taken away from you. So that's what you have that you can feel safe in and you can count on. You have that. Should you become my student, and those of you that are my students, I'll do everything I can to show you that. Believe me. That you can count on too. And I have some students that'll swear to that. So, that you can count on. In samsara, there is nothing upon which you can depend. Samsara is faulted by nature. It arises from ego clinging. It results in more clinging, which Lord Buddha says is the cause of all suffering. So the result of samsara is always suffering. But the great thing that the Buddha taught along with that miserable sounding lesson is that there is an end to suffering. And that end to suffering is called enlightenment. You are qualified and invited to achieve that result at any time. Sometimes the path seems extremely difficult. Sometimes devotion is a real challenge. Sometimes it feels like just too much darn work, too much of an investment, too scary, too this and too that. But believe me when I tell you, it is samsara that is scary. Because the thing about samsara is that it's like a narcotic. It's like a drug. You get into it, you know, just like you get into drugs. It gets addictive and it hooks you. And you wake up every day and you do and you do and you do and you're rushing and rushing and rushing and you spend, well, you know how it is, you know. You spend your whole life, the first part of your life, you spend it rushing toward growing up. And there's this big attaining the growing up status, and suddenly at 35 or so you go, well, I guess I grew up, I'm starting to get gray. Well, you know, so, okay, now you're growing up, and suddenly there's this rush to attain some sort of monetary status, and now you've got to get money, and you've got to get a car, got to get a house, you've got to have kids, got to have everything stable. So now you're stable, and right around 45 you get real tired of stability, and now you're rushing to find some meaning in life, and you're just running around going, well, maybe I should get a girlfriend or a boyfriend, I should try something new, who knows, and time to change marriages, let's be unfaithful, let's do something else. And so we're rushing around trying to find some meaning on that level, and then suddenly you get to be about 55 or 60, and you're rushing to get some money together so that you can leave it to your kids, who you forgot about for a while while you were trying to find yourself, and trying to, pretty soon you're getting ready to retire, now you better quick hurry up and retire, and now you retire, and you're like, whoa, now I'm retired, but hurry up and have some fun. So I got to take up fishing. I never fished before in my whole life, but now I got to fish because I'm retired. And then you're dead. And you spent your whole life rushing headlong toward that moment. And what did you take with you? Nothing. Nothing, because what you take with you into the bardo is nada. Nothing. You take nothing with you, not even a sesame seed's worth full of what you have accumulated during the course of your life. Not even that much. So you rushed pell-mell, headlong, hunky-dory down into this hole in which you can take nothing with you. What you take with you into the bardo is your own habitual tendency. What you take with you into the bardo is your own continuum. What you take with you into the bardo is your karma, your virtue, your non-virtue. That's what you have, basically. You have you. And in the bardo, you re-experience all that ego clinging. But let's say instead that you decided somewhere during the course of your life, got the big picture, got the blessing, broke the leg, or did whatever it took, had the broken heart, and you decided that your life was a vehicle for practice. And you accumulated some space in your mind instead of some money in your pocket. Maybe both. Who cares? I don't care. I have nothing against money. Some space in your mind, some compassionate activity, some virtue, some practice, some spiritual attainment, some meditation to the degree that you were able to recognize something of your own nature. Then you go into the bardo a rich, sentient being. Lots of wealth in your pocket, the wealth of attainment, the wealth of virtue. What you have accumulated during the course of this life absolutely will have an impact on your next life, and certainly in the bardo intermediate state. To the degree that you have practiced and were able to recognize the nature of your mind, to the degree that you were able to engage in compassionate activity, to that degree you will go into the bardo with accumulated virtue. With a certain level or degree of practice, it is entirely likely that in the bardo you will be able to recognize the nature of your mind, and in that way be able to attain realization to one degree or another. It's possible, and that's what we can't get. It's possible. Enlightenment seems like something way far away. We envision this very long road, way far away. We just can't take the first bite. We just can't take the first step. It's like thinking about walking to California from here. You can't take the first step. It's just too big. But it's doable, one step at a time. And there are different degrees of realization. One needn't attain total Buddhahood in order to have any result from it. There are many degrees of bodhisattvahood. Having practiced view or devotion alone, one has a really good shot of achieving some realization through the blessing of the Guru in the bardo, simply by remembering the nature of the Guru. One is compelled toward realization in the bardo. So it's doable. You may not get to California in one night, but who knows? You might get to Michigan. Well, maybe not. I guess it depends on your vehicle, doesn't it? And speaking of vehicles, the Bodhisattva path is an excellent vehicle. That vehicle of kindness, of devotion, the Vajrayana path as is practiced here, is an excellent place to start. So I hope that you will continue in your practice and try to accomplish view, which is inseparable from devotion, which is devotion, the understanding of the nature of the Guru, and ultimately the understanding of your own nature, which is inseparable from the Guru. This is an extremely important practice. And I hope that you will continue and wake up to the fact that even as we speak, you are rushing headlong into the bardo. What will you have with you? Will you go into the bardo with lots of ordinary richness and no spiritual richness? Or will you enter into the bardo a wealthy practitioner? That's up to you. When we do the 7-line prayer, we actually do it when we accumulate the 7-line prayer together as a group. We do it within a context of a puja or meditational practice that is called the shower of blessings. And the shower of blessings was put together by Mipam Rinpoche and is extremely auspicious practice. The method of the practice, the goal of the practice is to accumulate many repetitions of the 7-line prayer, which actually accumulates a great deal of virtue or merit within the mind stream. The 7-line prayer is an extraordinary prayer. It was not composed through ordinary means. In other words, some person didn't come up and simply write the prayer. It wasn't composed by an ordinary being. The way that it happened was that in front of a very auspicious lake, a mystical lake in Tibet, some practitioners were there in order to accomplish some meditation, and primordial wisdom dakinis appeared from the sky and were revealed to them, and these dakinis gave to them the blessing of the prayer and gave them the lung or wind transmission of the prayer, and told them that when they recite this prayer, particularly if they recite it with some tune, even a very simple tune, then the prayer would bring about an incredible blessing, and that the prayer is to Guru Rinpoche, or the very mind of enlightenment, the revelation of enlightenment. And should one repeat the 7-line prayer many times, even once, with devotion, Guru Rinpoche's mind would be turned toward you. In other words, the connection would be made so strongly, it would be like a mother unable to resist the cry of her child. That's the power of the prayer. The meaning of the prayer is very obvious on an ordinary level. One can see, not that there's anything ordinary about this prayer, that might have been the wrong word. But on a relative level, one can see the meaning of the prayer. The translation is there. It is a prayer to Guru Rinpoche. It describes Guru Rinpoche and indicates that one will follow Guru Rinpoche. The prayer actually exists on 3 different levels, however. The second level of meaning is that each one of the seed syllables, that is the seed syllables in Tibetan, each one of the syllables has a specific meaning. Each one of the syllables is a condensed version of that meaning. And the meaning of the prayer is an indication of one's sameness with the non-dual primordial wisdom nature. It is a way of creating the connection or the hook between one's own seemingly egocentric individual nature and that primordial wisdom nature. It actually describes the nature of the mind. It describes the method by which one can attain realization, and it describes the result. Each of those syllables is a very condensed. If one were to take each of those syllables, one could describe the meaning of each of those syllables in perhaps 3 or more pages of written material. Think about it that way. So it's extremely condensed, and the meaning has to do with connecting one with the perception of the primordial wisdom nature, which is one's nature. Also, each one of those syllables pronounced properly has an effect on the inner channels, winds, and fluids associated with one's inner psychic nature. And simply by repeating the prayer and pronouncing the syllables, and here's the important thing, pronouncing the syllables. When you have the opportunity to pronounce them, you should pronounce them and not just think them or not just read the prayer silently, but pronounce them with your voice, with your wind, because it does have an effect on the psychic winds, channels, and fluids within one's being. Even if one does not understand the meaning of the prayer, that is true. The third level of meaning is secret and cannot be given to the student unless they have repeated at least 300,000 repetitions of the 7-line prayer. I myself have made a commitment to accumulate at least 1 million repetitions of the 7-line prayer, which I haven't done yet, but I have accumulated 300,000 repetitions of the 7-line prayer. I suggest for each and every practitioner that you accumulate 100,000 repetitions of the 7-line prayer with your voice. It can be loud, by saying Hung Organ Yogi Nup Chang Sam, like that. Or it can be sung like Hung Organ Yogi Nup Chang Sam, something like that. Or you can whisper it, Hung Organ Yogi Nup Chang Sam, Pemagi Sardam Kola, like that. So long as there is wind used, that is extremely important, and you should try to do that. These practices that are given to us on the Vajrayana path, any of the Dharma revelations that we practice here, including the 7-line prayer, were revealed in some mystical and enlightened way. One does not sit down and simply compose practices. As in the case of the Namchu revelations, which are broadly practiced here in this temple, the Namchu revelations came about by originally Guru Rinpoche, who is the very mind of enlightenment and the seed of all practice, indicating that in some future time a tertin or treasure revealer would be born. His name was indicated, his conditions of birth were indicated, and in a symbolic fashion the time of his birth was indicated. After a while this tertin or treasure revealer was indeed born, and his name was Tertin Migyur Dorje. Migyur Dorje is commonly practiced here in this temple primarily because my predecessor, the first Ahkon Lhamo, and I am recognized as the incarnation of Ahkon Lhamo, was one of the close students of Tertin Migyur Dorje, and she was there to receive his blessing directly. And also the Namchu revelations, the revelations of Migyur Dorje, are most commonly practiced in the Payul tradition, and that my predecessor and her brother Kunzang Sherab founded together. So therefore the Payul tradition is filled with the blessing of Tertin Migyur Dorje. At any rate, Migyur Dorje appeared at the proper time, and as a child, he was called the child Tertin. As a child, a very young child, before the time that he could properly speak actually, and properly write, began to indicate that the deities, including Guru Rinpoche, had come to him and appeared to him in the sky. And appearing to him in the sky, they gave him the Dharma revelation in its entirety, from preliminary practice through generation stage practice all the way up into completion stage practice. Now he was too young to write the teaching down. He was not able to write the teaching. So as a child, starting at a very young age, he would say to his teacher, "Oh, now Guru Rinpoche is appearing to the sky, in the sky in front of me," and he's saying, and then he would begin to blurp out this incredible teaching, Dharma revelation from soup to nuts, in its proper form, with proper language and in proper order, perfectly done. Not one word had to be changed or had to be corrected. Of course, one would not correct miraculous words anyway. But this child gave forth this very adult and very educated speech absolutely correctly in its proper state. So his teacher had to follow him around with writing material all the time, even when the child went to the bathroom or when the child slept, because he was likely to wake up in the middle of the night or even in the middle of going to the bathroom, was likely to say, "Oh, now Guru Rinpoche is here," and he says, boom, So the child was never permitted to be alone. And all throughout his life until he was an adult, he continued to reveal the Namchu revelations. That is an indication of how Dharma revelation comes to us, and the 7-line prayer is one such thing. You cannot simply sit down and practice Dharma revelation from a book, because if you do, you don't have the empowerment that comes from the original empowerment that the Terton received when he saw Guru Rinpoche or whoever in the sky. Because at the time that the Dharma was revealed to the treasure revealer, he received also an empowerment or a blessing or a mind-deepening kind of intersection, if you can think of such a thing. He also received the breath of the revelation. And the Terton then was able to pass on the breath to his students and to their students and to their students. So you can only practice Dharma revelation if you receive it from a teacher who has themselves received it in a proper way. And it must be traced back to the original source. It must be an unbroken line of Dharma revelation. And the potency of that must be unbroken. One of the tragedies of Tibet being destroyed by the Chinese is that many Dharma revelations were destroyed, and the Lamas who held the empowerments. So now we can no longer practice certain Dharma revelations because the Lamas who had the empowerments were killed before they could pass on the blessing. But that did not happen with Namchu. His Holiness Painer Rinpoche was able to escape Tibet with all of the empowerments and blessings intact and was able to bring Namchu to the West. So we are very fortunate indeed.
So thank you very much for joining us here for this teaching by Jetsunma, and I hope you enjoyed it. There was actually 2 teachings on there, and that is very cool. Later today, I believe, we'll have to check the schedule. Check on, I'm going to say go to tara.org, which is our website, and go to events, and there's a calendar there, and check on the calendar. I believe that there is a teaching by Atira this evening at 5 p.m., beginning Buddhism. I don't have a topic, but I believe she's planning to teach today. And she is very, very good, and I think you'd really enjoy it. Atira is Jetsuma's daughter and heart student, and her teaching style is, as befits one of her age, is similar to Jetsuma's in that it's very direct, it's very engaging, and it's very relevant to the times we live in. And so I think you'll find some really good advice and just, enjoy it. So, and it'll be beneficial. At least I always find them. So, in addition, today we have a practice this afternoon, a soak practice at 2. And during the week, every night, we have Medicine Buddha practice at 7 p.m. We have soaks every day. You can check that same calendar and look. Any event that you see, click on it. When it opens up, it'll show you whether it's on Zoom or it's on Facebook or it's on YouTube and how to get there. So you can, there's, many ways to go with that. Our next teaching of Jetsuma's will be at 7:30 on Wednesday night, and we hope you join us then. And meanwhile, Thanks so much for being with us today. We are so happy to see you. Be safe. Enjoy your Thanksgiving. Have a great week. And take care. Hope to see you soon. Come visit the temple whenever you can. It's absolutely beautiful outdoors. There's lots to see and do. And the prayer room is open on weekends from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. So there's that. All for you. Enjoy.